lu ça
je ne sais que
dans les échos, j'étais investi comme directeur. Je dis, je suis beaucoup plus facile que Paul Hermelin. Qui n'est pas facile du tout, mais alors il le...
Good morning, Monsieur Lorenzi and Monsieur Melin. So when we were asked to greet at the Maison de la Radio the Rencontres Économiques of 2020, we're right in the middle of the crisis of COVID-19. We were confined with no visibility on when or how we could pull out of this nightmare. At that moment, we understood that if Radio France wasn't able to greet the event, it probably couldn't have taken place at that date anyway, or with the importance that is its role. And but you know, we all know we need to have a debate on how we will collectively pull out socially and economically from this crisis, and to know what this crisis has changed. And this is what the rencontres have become en Seine, to have these debates take place near the Seine River rather than near the Étang de Berre. So when we live such a crisis, we experience such a crisis, and when we see we see how important it is to debate, to discuss whatever our opinions may be, especially when we disagree. And on a lot of topics, among other topics, economy is part of this, the plurality, the diversity, the multi-generational context aspect. And our media of public service, by greeting these rencontres, we thought it was very important that we take our full part in this. And these rencontres of 2020 reflects the plurality of positions, whether political or represented by the trade unions. And of course, we'll have representatives of all these entities take part. I took part in very interesting exchanges this morning with various think tanks, and I listened to the expectations of the 18-28 age group who were asked to meet here at Radio France, just to show how this age group is interested by the present situation, and also bearing in mind of the impact that our crisis will have. So our public media needs to be able to decipher, to explain, and give all the understanding keys to the public on topics that are extremely complex and complicated. And in a certain way, as we have done throughout the sanitary crisis, to continue to explain the stakes and scientific stakes, among others. And it's in this context that our antennas will greet these encounters, or these rencontres, with the relevance in the analysis and with a great plurality, but also with all the room our press rooms find useful to give to an economic and social debate in the very specific context that our country is going through or is facing. So I hope we have some very interesting debates in the Maison de la Radio, and that will be relayed. And dear Monsieur Lorenzi and Monsieur Melin, you who chair the board of the Rencontres Économiques, I will now ask you to take the floor. Thank you, Mrs. Veil. I chair the board of the X Festival. So today I'm in a strange situation. I am the represent X, even though I'm originally from Avignon, but I accept to leave my dear Vaucluse to go to X. So the rencontres are very closely in relation with the Opera Festival of Aix-en-Provence. It's part of the attraction of the rencontre to be able to invite a lot of people to the different shows, to different performances at the Théâtre de Provence. And the rencontres are a very important economic partner of the festival. The rencontres are not abandoning Aix. This is just a parenthesis here on the shores of the Seine River. And I hope that next year we will meet in Aix, and just remember this these Rencontres 2020. Aix has to stay alive, and during these confinement period, we just worked at keeping the festival alive. Of course, we had to cancel the physical representations. We had to shift on a digital mode. It's a big difference, but it's not a surprise that we had to move to the digital broadcasting. We've started to broadcast some performances on the 29th and 28th and 29th of June, and on the 8th of July, we will have some very nice operas that will be proposed on the digital platforms. And the talent of Pierre Audy, the Director General, was to make sure that we wouldn't lose any of the productions of 2020. We've managed to safeguard all of them, and they will be postponed to 2021, 2022, 2023. So the treasury, the wealth, the agenda of the festival had a warm welcome, and we're very happy to say that it's not lost. It was just postponed. And so Aix en Seine is a bit of a ex-presence on the shores of the Seine River and in the Maison de Radio France. We've always been partners. We greet students, all those who take part in the Rencontres Économiques, because it takes place at the Aix University. Corporate leaders come to these rencontres. Carmen, the opera will be proposed. It was contested because the staging of the Carmen opera was a bit, let's say, different. And I think it's in the interest of the festival is not to play like the big opera house. We don't expect to see in Aix what you see at the Bastille Opera or at the Fenice. You expect something else, and Pierre Audy has taken us there. And I'm here to say that the Rencontres are attached to music, to Aix-en-Provence, and to the opera. And Jean-Hervé invited me to the sessions, and I thank him for that. Actually, I was born in Belgium, and from Belgian parents, and I had the chance to. I'll have the chance to meet the Prime Minister in Belgium, and I'll be back here on Sunday. So, and thank you, Monsieur Lorenzi, the President. You were re-elected. You're a President of the Rencontre on a permanent basis, and you had a great result in the elections, more than the Russian President. Jean-Hervé, thank you, everybody. So I'll start by thanking warmly Radio France. Because if Radio France and its president and the whole team of Radio France and all the channels had not been there, well, we would be wondering on who in the afternoon will be appointed the minister of whatever ministry in France. We wouldn't be here to debate. So thank you very warmly for greeting us here. So I would like to start by explaining to what extent these rencontres were maintained. We wanted to keep them going because in the end, there are two major objectives today. The first is that we are faced, as you all know, to a crisis as we had never been experienced in the last century, extremely violent crisis, and the impacts will continue for long. And how can we imagine for just a moment that economists would not be present at this time? What would be, we will be in Aix on the 12th of September, but nevertheless, what would be the purpose of waiting the whole summer without having tried to debate on all these issues? The second comment I'd like to make, which is probably stronger, it seems to me that the situation in which France finds itself, and the world also, France and Europe that is in fact in a situation of a rupture. There's the specificity of this period, and this will be the object of the inaugural session in a few minutes, that leads to foster a dialogue. But for reasons of confinement, in the end, the dialogue was difficult to to carry out. And when you look at all the great events and all the events that had to be postponed, that were scheduled for June, that had to be postponed, well, it would seem to us, and it's probably the first declaration of the Cercle des économistes, it seems to us that the debate must take place in our country. We will have a new economic plan to restart the economy or the French society. It's very complicated. That's been done with a lot of talent by the government team in the recent months, but it's not enough to if we think that remote work has to be encouraged, or the greening of our politics have to be also encouraged at a certain pace, if we have to play such and such a role in Europe, all this has to be discussed in the country. And that's the reason why, or the second reason why, we decided to maintain, by all means, and again, thanks to Radio France, our debate. This debate is very specific, nothing to do with what we've known before. It's the 20th anniversary. I should have started with this 20th anniversary. So happy birthday to the Rencontres Économiques, the 20th anniversary. And as Paul just mentioned it earlier, that we've always organized with the festival. We were born from music, but it's a very old story, that. We, in reality, had 19 sessions that were all very interesting. But what we're doing this year has nothing to do with what we've done in the past, for three reasons. And the first reason is that, technically speaking, it's complicated. The teams of Radio France are really in the studios, working on the cabling, working under very stressful conditions. And we'll have in a few minutes 5 parallel sessions with video conferences, people talking from all over the world, very complicated, with a Marseille company, agency, which is in Aix-en-Provence, and trying to orchestrate all this. So it's really a performance, and we relied on the talent of each and every one. And I put both hands on the table. I hope that everything will work well. I'm sure it will, but I really hope that we're successful. Second comment is that when we took the decision 2.5 months ago, in fact, as Sibyle said earlier, and that we Radio France accepted to greet us, it was a very difficult mission. So we considered then that if we did have a debate, it wouldn't be a debate of economists, for example. We've never had stricto sensu economist debates, but a much broader debate on the evolution of the French society. And it's the reason for which, when you look at the list of the guest speakers, I will only talk about the French part now, you have, in reality, a very thorough representation of the political scene in France, of the trade unions, of a lot of the economists of all origins, of all faiths, if I can say so. We had the first meeting of the think tanks, and it starts with TAC, the Atterré, and Terra Nova, for example. So we have all political sides represented. So we're in a universe of diversity. And chiefly, we introduced massively the point of view of youth, because the future of this world is not in my hands. And I'm sorry, it's sad for me, but it's obviously youth that will take over. And the second aspect, in 2 months, the government and the public authorities will face a very acute problem. Cannot be compared, is the oncoming of on the work market of in terms of internships or jobs of a generation of some 500 to 700,000 people. So we have to find solutions for this population. And so we've introduced in our program the presidents of Lafarge and UNEB, so the international, the student unions, and mainly, and this is what's a novelty here, is there will be a declaration before the declaration of the Cercle des économistes, but a declaration of all the people who have participated. So first of all, before that, there will be a declaration of the youth represented by some 20 associations, nonprofits, so they have 20 minutes. And since everything is timed, it will not be easy, but the youth, I think, is very well represented and will express its point of view when it's so strongly impacted by this crisis, unprecedented crisis. So after that, what do we believe? In fact, we believe that this crisis, contrary to some economists who I call voodoo, well, obviously this crisis will last in time, and so we need to, and when I say us, it's the position of the Cercle des économistes. That's us. I'm not talking personally here. I'm talking on behalf of the Cercle des économistes. We think that the forecasts are very difficult to do. Just look at some 20 forecasts for 2021. All the world or global organizations. You know how the opinions are diverging. Nobody knows what's going to happen in 2021. But everybody agrees that for developed countries, we will not recover the level of activity that we had at the end of last year. Let's be optimistic. It's the beginning of the weekend, so let's be optimistic. So before mid-2022. And this is a rather optimistic forecast. And what is this linked to? Well, to the brutality of the event. But this event, chiefly, happened at the time when we were in economic trajectory where we had a slowdown. Because, dear friends, as of last year, don't remember, 11 months ago, we had chosen as the topic, we propose today, act faced with the deregulation of the world. So whether Trump is reelected or not, we will have a conflict between China and the U.S., commercial trade wars. We have a problem of the mastering of technologies, the problem of inequalities. We all know it's a major issue in our countries, and so on and so forth. So it's in this framework that we have to work to see what we need to do here in France and in Europe. And there I have to announce one of the most fascinating elements of, because we managed to convince the president of the European Commission, Mrs. van der Leyen, and the president that Paul will accompany, the president of the European Council, Charles Michel, who will give us when we have this terrible negotiation on the distribution of investments in Europe, they will share with us their position. That should be absolutely interesting. And so after saying this being said, I'm sorry, I have two comments to make eventually, if I may. We want, as the Cercle, the Cercle des économistes, to well understand the responses we need to give, separate phases. We shouldn't mix everything, the economy, social aspects, and everything, because we shouldn't mix things up. So the first is what has been the protection of the French society, of its economy. It was done with, like everybody, I would say, it was done with a lot of talent, a lot of billions also, but it was done quickly, rapidly, efficiently, with not much bureaucracy. That was surprising. In fact, we left the bureaucracy aside. Everybody said, you know, the bank doesn't want to grant me the loan, and a month later it was solved. And so things were well handled, well done. And the second phase, it's a transition phase in which we will have shocks that will last. And I would say it's not the tail or the end, but the extension of everything that's taken place. So unemployment, loss of jobs. The President of the Republic raised that issue yesterday. So we'll have a lot of jobs losses. Numbers vary, but we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who have lost their jobs. And unfortunately, unless the recommendation that we will make Sunday may change things, but we don't know. But a lot of youth will be impacted, and all this must be dealt with in and great reactivity was the case for the automobile industry, aeronautics, tourism, and for the partial unemployment, temporary unemployment. All this is for the transition phase. And then there's the third phase. Don't like the idea of a new plan to restart the economy. I think it's too weak to use that expression. I think we need to think in terms of perceiving how the evolution of the French society should be done, how it will evolve. And I'll take an example. The French people are always complaining, not personally, but on the collective standpoint. We have a lot of hierarchy. We have a lot of layers in our bureaucracy. A young child who doesn't start well in life, doesn't have any qualifications, will not be able to overcome the barriers and everything. And so what can change is the greening of the economy, obviously address the issues of inequalities. And addressing this issue is the inequality faced with employment and qualifications. Obviously, it's the idea of relocating the activity and so on and so forth. And so that's the third phase. And we are pleading a form of resurrection, which is we have to take the time to listen to each other. We shouldn't rush. And that's the position of the Cercle, Cercle des économistes. We shouldn't rush into things. If we found out that all this should be unveiled in October, November, I think it wouldn't make us sick. I guarantee we need to take the time to listen and wait before we propose our solutions. We have to listen to what the French people want, and God knows if our country is not easy to grasp. It's difficult sometimes to understand how the position of the French population. So, and last point, France is at risk because it's divided. Again, it strengthens the need for a dialogue. For the countries at risk because, like other countries in the world, is subject to difficult macroeconomic context. We don't know how we will overcome this. All those who follow the economy, know that some sectors are starting well or restarting well, others not. There's some highly qualified people in the aeronautics sector, for example. We heard the announcement that a lot of people have to leave their jobs that are highly qualified, and how we can transform these qualifications to be able to work in other sectors. So this is very complicated, very difficult, and we will absolutely have to stay aware, to be aware of the problems as they exist. And so we have a plan. I'm looking at the timing here because we have little time to conclude this introduction. There's always a rule. On Fridays, it's a day where we go in depth of the concept of acting, the concept of deregulation. So we're just analyzing the document, the text. On Saturday, we generally start getting on the way. We get more in depth in the different topics. And on Sunday, it's the time to make propositions at the French and world and European level. And I must say that in the last session will be on the values of Europe. Very interesting session. I recommend it, but I don't want to unveil the content. So this garden we have is not exactly what will happen. In fact, we have 8 words that you'll find everywhere that will go across the 3 days. So unfortunately, I have to look at them. So the 3 keywords for these rencontres: youth, obviously, the word localization, relocation, issue of territories, the social lift, which no longer exists, l'ascenseur social in French, the digitalization of society. The word poverty. 20% of the French population will find itself in a very difficult condition, so we have to give a lot of thought to that. The word reinventing the public interventions. And behind all this, there's the debate on debt, Some of them some want to cancel the debt, and as economists, we think that we need to postpone this debate. But nevertheless, there's a moment where this debt has to be paid back, well, at least partially. Yes. So it means that either we need to have an exceptional growth, I hope, but otherwise we have to be able to reorganize, reshuffle our expenses, our expenditures. And you'll see that the proposals we'll make on Sundays will be quite serious and quite solid on these aspects. And the last session I mentioned that will be chaired by Françoise Benhamou and Sylvie Kaufmann. So to see how Europe can recreate itself around a pole of values rather than always wondering if we should have a minister of the economy of the Eurozone. You know, no, we can't build the future on ministerial decisions. And the last topic will be the long term. We can only think of things for the long term. You know, in the 20 last years, we've lived in a world that was a financial world, financialized. But it means that we were living on a day-to-day basis. Everything was done to the day-to-day basis. But obviously, it's not the way we should think of tomorrow's world. So I guess the profitability rate, the infrastructure, and everything, complex issues. And here we'll make some strong proposals in our conclusions. And after all this, I'd like to extend my warmest thanks to Radio France. I'm sure they will understand how we can be useful in a debate. It's just by chance that we're organized the first debate, but that's life, you know. But you'll see, we'll have some very interesting debates. I thank Paul HERMELIN from the X Festival, really one of the wonders of the month of July and throughout the year also, because you're present year long. And we will conclude with two declarations, and I propose that the streaming start to explode as of 5 p.m. But before, of course, but at least at 5 p.m., 5:40 p.m. You know, we'll have the younger generations, the youth, taking the floor. And then we'll have the wise, pseudo-wise, who will express not necessarily the position of the Cercle des économistes, but the positions stemming from the Cercle des économistes for part, and of the hundreds and thousands of questions that were addressed to us over the recent weeks and the 3 recent days, the proposals that are made by the younger generations, and chiefly, dear friends, the result of the 52 sessions of these rencontres. There's a team that is writing down all the propositions, all the debates, see if we have a consensus or not. And at 6 p.m., we will have what we call, we'll talk the final declaration of the Rencontres d'Aix-en-Provence. But it's the platform of proposals that will stem from this 20th edition of the Rencontres Économiques d'Aix under the auspices and with the very friendly welcoming of Radio France and Aix-en-Seine for greeting Aix-en-Seine. So it's a wonderful gift for our 20th anniversary. Thank you very much.